Good morning and welcome back to Culture and the Environment. For this unit of the course on markets and ecology, you have read chapters from a monograph by an anthropologist called Anna Tsing. The book is entitled The Mushroom at the End of the World on the Possibility of Life in Capitalist Ruin. This is a monograph about a non-human protagonist, a Matsutake mushroom. The book follows the human and non-human lives of the disturbed forest ecologies where the mushroom thrives and the precarious livelihood activities of the mushroom pickers, their hopes, as well as their sensorial knowledge of the mushroom. The book also interrogates contemporary debates about the science behind the Matsutake mushroom's life and its relationship with various forest tree species. So following the mushroom, from forest pickers to buyers, to wholesale traders, and to the consumers of the Matsutake, the connection that Anna Tsing traces span the globe, from Oregon in the United States to Japan, Yunnan in China, and Finland and more. In Japan, Matsutake, or TRICHOLOMA matsutake as the Latin name for the mushroom, forms host relations with the red pine, Pinus densiflora. This pine germinates best in the sunlight and with the kinds of mineral residues in the soil usually left behind in landscapes that have been previously deforested. Matsutake harvesters know well the aroma of the matsutake, and the smell is well represented in Japanese poetry. So take this example from Akemi Tachibana, writing in the mid-19th century. The sound of a temple bell is heard in the cedar forest at dusk. The autumn aroma drifts on the road below. Or take this other poem from Yamaguchi Sodo, writing at the end of the 17th century. O Matsutake, the excitement before finding them. In Japan, Matsutake, long prized, as in neighboring Korea, became very common in the Japanese forests of the early 20th century. However, by the end of the 20th century, where peasant woodlands have given way to suburban enclaves, or where they have been altogether abandoned and have grown back into dense thickets of broad-leaved trees, pines dying from invasive nematode diseases, and so forth, the Japanese matsutake becomes increasingly rare. Nevertheless, the price of the matsutake skyrockets and goes up, and its demand also increases and keeps growing, and this gives rise to an international matsutake trade picking up around the 1990s and continuing to this day. Now, Anna Tsing's book also takes the form of a matsutake itself. It's structured in a non-linear way, in riots, in flashes, in rhythms, in tangles of intersecting chapters, in the same way that the matsutake intersects with other kinds of life stories. So broadly, Tsing is starting from the standpoint of what she called third nature. This is a term that other scholars have used as well. So if first nature means ecological relations, including those with humans, second nature, which was a Marxist concept, it typically means that which has been transformed through human work or labor. So third nature is that, for Tsing, third nature is that which can still live and flourish despite the wreckage of capitalist production, despite the distraction and the suffering. So third nature is where there is no more grand narratives about progress, about modernity, about salvation. This is a world of economic precarity, of ecological destructions, a world of uncertain futures. What does it mean to inhabit the ruin that has become our collective home? Tsing asks on page 3 of the book. And this is a question that I would like to pose to you as well. What does it mean to inhabit the ruin of our collective home? In the book, alongside stories of mushroom pickers and matsutake forests themselves, Tsing also seeks to advance a theory of contemporary capitalism's relationship to ecology, one that is not characterized by ideas of progress or order. And she suggests that capitalism appropriates value produced in unplanned patches, like the patches of mushrooms that flourish in the forest, like the patches of the mushroom picker camps that sprout out in Oregon, like the patches of the Yunnan peasants who have reinvented new ways of managing forests and harvesting the matsutake. So, as a thought exercise, compare the capitalist value of the matsutake mushroom as it travels in international markets with the palm oil plantation form that you read about in Tanya Lee's work. The colonial plantation and the colonial sugarcane plantation in particular, fueled by the labor of enslaved people characterized by a monocrop arrangement, provided the model later on for the modern industrial factory, historians have argued. The plantation, in fact, like the factory, is a model that is, in theory, infinitely scalable. It can be made really big by keeping the same structure of arrangements. However, matsutake absolutely resists this plantation model. The matsutake cannot be cultivated. It only grows in the wild, so to speak. The matsutake needs particular multi-species collaboration to grow and to produce the fruit, which is the part that the harvesters gather to sell on the market. And matsutake grow well, especially on the ruins of former forest plantations. So here, the relationship between matsutake and capitalism is somehow complicated. So if capitalism, broadly defined, is the accumulation of wealth through process of extraction, also through the circulation of capital itself, the extraction of wealth from workers by paying them less of the value of what they produce, the extraction of raw materials from ecological processes that precede capitalism. Think about the value of oil, think about coal, think about the metabolic processes of the livestock of cows and sheep and pigs living in large industrial farms. But Singh is interested in processes that are both shaped by capitalist relations and yet not entirely dominated by it. She writes, capitalism doesn't exist in a single dominant shape, and yet it has an impact, and yet it doesn't completely reshape the world in its own image. Let us look at the matsutake mushrooms themselves. Matsutake thrive in forests that have been previously logged. So, for example, in the large forests of Oregon in the United States, foresters had suppressed fires to preserve timber for logging in the early 20th century. And previously, Native American communities had maintained these forests by, in fact, starting and controlling the seasonal fires. But the absence of fire in this managed forest meant the death of the large Ponderosa pines that had made them so valuable for loggers to begin with. And these are types of pines that really need fire to sprout and to propagate. Lodgepole pines and fir really started to thrive, and matsutake mushrooms, which fruit after about 50 years of growing in the lodgepole pines, followed. Singh writes a lot about the smell of the matsutake and the sensorial engagement that people form with matsutake. Matsutake smell is often repellent to people of European origins and pleasurable for many others. Pickers use smell to find and identify matsutake, and also to find and follow the many flying insects who are attracted by the mushroom smell. So if you follow the insect, you might find the matsutake. Smell is chemical sensitivity, and it is also learned. To smell and to love the matsutake and to cook it and to savor it, one is transformed, Anna Singh writes. Smell, in fact, provides a vehicle for memories and also a way to think about history as the things that become wrapped together and entangled and passed on. It is, as Singh puts it in the book, a nature-culture knot. Matsutake pickers, at least in the United States, are often displaced and disenfranchised migrant communities. They work on their own and they sell the forest harvest to middlemen while also saving some for their own consumption. Their lives are characterized by great freedom but also by great precarity. And I will return to that in a second. Anna Singh's book really foregrounds the cross-species interactions, the relationships of symbiosis, and she calls them relations of world-making. So what does it mean to make a world? What is world making? Think about how organisms make living places as they change earth, air, water, and each other in the process. These are plants that live on earth thanks to fungi that make soil by digesting rocks. You cannot understand the Matsutake without understanding the trees and the soil and the minerals in their symbiotic relations. But these are also relationships between people, and Tsing calls these relationships of collaborative survival. Collaboration, in Tsing's words, is working together across difference. Collaboration is contamination, and collaboration is also staying alive. And I wanted to pause for a second and reflect on what might it mean to think of collaboration as staying alive. So in Tsing's book, we meet some of the Matsutake pickers in Oregon. Many of them are refugees from Southeast Asia. They are from Mien, Hmong, Lao, and Khmer ethnicities. There are some Native Americans too, a few Latino and white pickers as well. Matsutake forage in the Oregon forest become eventually Japanese gifts. And in the process, they pass through the hands of pickers who harvest the fungi in national forests, and then to independent buyers, bulkers, field agents, other bulkers, importers, exporters, Japanese importers, and then to the final customers who might purchase them and then typically gift the Matsutake. While they all relish the freedom of their work, in Oregon, pickers' ideas of freedom are also shaped by their specific ethnic and class positionings, as Tsing finds out over the course of her research. So broadly, Asian pickers tend to more regularly apply for the required harvesting permits, while white pickers, many of them vets haunted by war stories and atrocities that they've witnessed and committed in battle, more proudly defy the rules. Lao pickers tend to go for the more unusual patches of Matsutake and to take more risks for the potential of highest rewards. Latinos tend to work for buyers who pay them salaries instead of bidding for their catch. White veterans and Asian refugees enact a sense of freedom in their mushroom foraging practices, while Latino pickers, many of whom are undocumented migrants, picking mushrooms in between other kinds of seasonal work, tend to play it safer to avoid potential repercussion, including deportation. Tsing takes us to other places where people are harvesting Matsutake for a global market, and one of them is the province of Yunnan in China. Their forests host prized Matsutake mushrooms, and authorities, she tells us, have recently implemented new plans to semi-privatized forest management in an attempt to reduce the depletion of environmental resources. The idea being if there is like a private overseer over the forest, people will self-regulate use. So Matsutake pickers in Yunnan can auction their access rights from the village households who have contracted forest management rights. In practice, however, the forest remains open to all in the community, except during the Matsutake picking seasons, when the mushroom harvesters create enclosures to prevent other people from accessing and potentially ruining their catch. But during the rest of the year, the thick traffic and thick use of the forest in fact keeps it optimal for the growth of Matsutake and keeping other fungi at bay. So then in Japan, the Matsutake are bought and then given as a gift to others. Importers send their shipments to wholesalers, and then they sell the Matsutake to intermediate wholesalers, either through an auction or through an agreement. And part of this process of what these intermediaries do is about assessing the quality of the Matsutake and deciding what kind of buyer it should go to. And people talk about that as a process of matchmaking. Then the Matsutake are sold either to a specialty grocery store or an expensive restaurant. And buying a Matsutake to consume it typically means to make a gift. And through gift making, that's how we build relationships. So to buy a Matsutake is to think about making a relationship with someone else to whom the Matsutake will be gifted. And even though the Matsutake has been produced and harvested and traded globally, when it enters Japan, the buyers and the consumers rank the Matsutake according to a set of specifically Japanese values and preferences. So stepping back, there are at least three large takeaways. The first is that we must theorize humans and other organisms together, attending to relations of symbiosis and not as separate entities. These relations, however, unfold in contingent historical encounters, and these are shaped by longer histories, as we have seen in the units on political ecology of this course. The second takeaway is that markets and ecologies are mutually implicated, they're co-produced, and they transform each other in the process, even sometimes across long distances. And the third is the importance of thinking about environmental precarity and distraction in the current moment and in the foreseeable future, while also attending to ongoing practices of resilience, hope, collaborations, and of serious possibilities for continuing life. This is all for this unit, and I look forward to seeing you all very soon.